In this video, we're going to go through how to use the setup wizard to set up your grades in your Markbook, just like you would in Markbook or in EdSpeak gradebook. But this will allow you to record all your marks and do all your grade calculations right within Brightspace. And I think you'll see some of the advantages to that as we move forward in this video and others. So in order to access the grades, we're going to click on Course Admin, go down to Assessment and Grades. So the first thing we're going to do here is run this setup wizard, which is this little tab right here. And these are all the default options. And if we go down to the bottom, we can then click on Start. Now notice there are default options here in terms of the parameters that this course is going to be set up with. Now, if your default options aren't the same as what is seen here, or what I'm showing you, that's just because they've been recently changed. And if it's an older course, you may see different ones. But if it's a newer course, you'll see the same as me. So the first step here is to choose whether you're using a graded, points-based or a weighted system. Now, this is really important. So if you are using, say, TAC, and you want your categories like thinking, application, knowledge, and communication to be weighted a certain amount, then you're going to want to choose weighted. If you're doing learning goal-based assessment and you want all your learning goals, you want to be able to specify what percentage of the grade each learning goal is, then you're going to want to use weighted. If you're doing learning goal-based assessment and you want the learning goals to kind of auto-weight themselves based on how many points are in each one or how many marks are given in each learning goal, then you're going to use points. That's the system that I used to use. But I know for a lot of people, they use the weighted system. So we'll select weighted for our purposes here. And I'll come back and do another tutorial on the points and learning goal-based assessment using just the point system later on. So final grade release, do we want to release the final grade as it is, or do we want to be able to adjust it first? I would always say choosing the adjusted final grade is a safer bet, just because you get to adjust it based on any professional judgment or discretion that you have before the students then see it. Grade calculations, this just means if there's an assessment where a student has not received a grade, is it automatically a 0, or is it left as like a no mark in Markbook, which would be drop ungraded items. So if you select this, drop ungraded items, it will be like a no mark, so it doesn't factor into the calculation. If you click that, it would just simply automatically put a 0 in there. So if you do select the drop ungraded items, you can always go back and put a 0 in later. But again, this might be a little bit of a safer bet, just leaving it like that and putting the zeros in later so students don't freak out when they see zeros appearing everywhere. So the grade scheme percentage just means that the students are going to see their marks as a percent. Number of decimal places to display, that's just for you, the teacher. When you're entering marks and see the grade book, you'll see 2 decimal places on all the marks. You can change that if you want. For student view display options, you can change these and you'll get used to using them as you see the gradebook more. But the grade details, just the points grade, the weighted grade, the grade scheme symbol, and grade scheme color. There's lots of cool options you can do with those so students can be able to look at their marks and you can sort through their marks a little easier. We'll talk about those later. The number of decimals display, this is what the student's going to see. So right now it's defaulted to 0. I know a lot of times students like to see one decimal place as well, whatever you think your students are going to prefer, whether it's rounded to the nearest whole percentage or not. And number of character displays to display for text items is just in the title, how many characters they're going to see when they look at their gradebook. Okay, so display final grade calculation to users. Do you want them to see how you calculated their final grade or not? And it's a detailed breakdown essentially. So you get to choose whether they see that or not. So we click continue and that's it. And so we're going to just look here. All our options are as we specified. We'll click finish. And there we go. Now it's going to give you options to create a new category, grade item, import grades, things like that. We'll go through some of those things in a later video, but for now, we at least now have this gradebook set up. So if you go to enter grades, you can see all your students listed, and that's where we're going to begin with our next video. We'll go to manage grades. All right, and then we'll go to new and category. So this is where you're going to enter the name for your category. So if it's TAC, you're going to put in knowledge, application, communication, or thinking. If you're doing learning goal-based assessment, you're going to put in the name of your learning goal. Now, I have this set up as a weighting method of calculation right now, as opposed to the points base. So weighting means that as I enter these categories, I'm going to put in the percent weight of the final grade, which I know a lot of people are going to want to do, especially if they're doing TAC, where you're like 35% knowledge, 30% communication, etc. So we're going to do that. So let's say we'll do our knowledge category. And again, like I talked about in the last video, if you want to do a points-based system, and that works well with learning goal-based assessment and learning goals, where the learning goals kind of weight themselves based on how many marks are in there, you can do that using the point system, and we can look at that in another video. So here is knowledge, and you can put a short name. I'll put no. So here's where you put the weight. So let's say that it's 35% of the final grade. We're going to put that there. So now that category is going to be worth 35% of your final grade. Now distribution. Distribution here is allows you to talk about how assessments are going to be weighted within that category. So the first option is manually assign weight to the items in the category. So if you put a test in, you're going to say it's worth 20% of that category or 30% of that category. You could also have it as distribute weights by points across all items in the category. So if you had a quiz that was 10 marks and a test that was 20 marks within the category, it's automatically going to weight that test twice as much. So that might be an option you want to do. That way you can just kind of let all of them weight themselves, or you could do the thing where like tests are 10%, quizzes are 5%, however you want to do it within that. But that just talks about how the assessments within that category are going to be weighted. But the category will still be 35% of the overall mark. All right. And then you can just put display options. Do you want them to be able to see the class average or the grade distribution? And if you want to override display items for this option, meaning it's not going to be the same as your other things, you want it specific to this one, you can do that as well. All right. Meaning you can show different things from what we had set in the first place. Anyway, so that's all you have to do for your category. You hit save and close. And now that is one of your categories here, and it's weighted 35%. You go first of all to manage grades. In the last video, we set up knowledge, that was 35%. I set up application thinking and communication categories as well, just so you can see you could have them all weighted already, adding to 100% before you even start. And you could do that with learning goals as well if that's the way you are evaluating students. So now though, what we want to do is go new item. So this is the actual item. All right, so choose a grade item type. Do we want this to be numeric, select box, pass fail, or calculated? So you can actually calculate marks based on a whole bunch of other grade items. So you could add up all of them and divide by something or whatever. That's the calculated one. And that's just based on marks they've got on previous grade items. But for the most part, we're going to be going to numeric. That's the mark out of something. So here, numeric, we're going to go, let's say test 1. And if on the test there were multiple categories, let's say there were knowledge and application on the test. I'm going to put knowledge here just so I know when I'm looking at the gradebook. And then short name, I'll go T1K for test 1 knowledge. And this is where we select which category. And now that's going to go into the knowledge category. So the grading is going to be, let's say it was out of 20 points. Right now, weighting, this is where you can specify a weighting if you want, but I'm going to leave that blank because in these categories, again, I selected the option where it's going to auto weight within each of the items. So the items that are worth more will be weighted more. If you want, you can change that again to specify the weight, and you would be allowed to do that. But in this case, I'm going to leave it just like that. Default scheme, and that's it. I'll go save and close. So now that test 1 knowledge shows up right there, and that's our grade item. Now let's say test 1 also had that application component. Let's create that one. Again, that's going to be numeric. And test 1 application. T1A, category this time application. We'll say application was out of 17. Again, I'm going to leave that weight blank. You can specify it if you'd like, but I'm going to leave it blank. So it's going to weight based on the number of points. Everything else should be good. Now, rubrics, we are going to go over rubrics in another lesson. That's a whole other thing we're going to go through. Very useful as well. But for now, we're just looking at how do you set this up as a traditional gradebook with your items and just being able to manually enter your marks. So now you can see that we have test 1 knowledge here, test 1 application here, and what they're out of. And right now, they're weighted 100% in their categories because they're the only thing in there.